Hey guys, it's Kiki from Eat More to Weigh Less, and I just really want to talk today about avoiding the trap of extremism. And I just feel like that, especially in this industry, there are just, it's like it's built on extremes. It's always either or, or only do this or never do that. And I tend to try to stay away from using those phrases, and I really, really encourage you to do the same. When you start to hear someone say, that things should only be this way, or things should never be this way, or don't do that, or do this, there tends to, there's a fine line because we're all different and not everything is going to work for everybody. And the same way that we, discuss like with food, everything in moderation, it's the same with so many other things in the industry that when we get caught up in this whole extremism of fitness and diet and health, that we tend to miss out on the bigger picture, because really nothing in excess is really going to create the result that you want. The point of this journey is for you to have balance. So whereas, obviously some people may have intolerances to certain things that someone else can handle, or someone may have a different body physique goal, or maybe they have a different fitness goal than someone else. So, the method that one person is going to use is going to be completely different from another person. And I just want to point out some of the things that you may see within the industry, or when you're doing your own research, or maybe even in your own mindset for when you hear something, when you hear, maybe you'll hear about something being a superfood, or, something being very good, that you decide that more of that is better. And that's not always the case. And so a couple examples of that I'll give you just to show you where extremes can start to creep in to your mentality or into your research, and also just to like what my stance is on these things, where EM2WL stands on extremism as a whole. One example would be like rep range exclusion. We talk a lot about periodization, and maybe some people get it, some people don't. Maybe some people don't want to, because, you will hear often in the fitness community where, one rep range is prized over the other, which that isn't true. There is no perfect rep range. There's always going to be a possibility that one rep range will work better at certain times than others. And so you have to keep that in mind, because the rep range is going to depend on your goal. But for most people, for the general fitness population, the recreational exerciser, or someone that's just trying to get into shape, you're going to want to touch all the rep ranges. You're not going to want to just tap into one and stay there, because that's a recipe for plateau. So, I like to point that out, because obviously we are advocates of heavy lifting, and we're always going to preach that, men, women, everyone, should lift heavy for best results. But the point of that is that you're lifting heavy in whatever rep range you're in. So it's going to change. I don't just stick to one rep range. Sometimes I am in, 12, 15, 20 reps, very rarely. And other times I'm in the, 8 to 10 rep range. Or, my love is the 3 to 5 rep range. But it's important to note that even though I love the 3 to 5 rep range, and, I will tell everybody, like, oh, it's great. You feel so beast when you're in this rep range. Like with my own clients, I'm not going to just keep them there. I'm not going to tell everybody that you should only ever lift 5 reps forever and ever and ever, because it doesn't make sense. I don't even stay in that rep range forever and ever and ever. I would not get the physique results that I want if I stayed in that rep range. I also tend to not get the strength results that I want if I only stay there. Obviously, if strength is my main goal, then I would stay there for longer periods of time, but I would still dip into other rep ranges, because staying and with only one thing over and over tends to make your body like desensitized to it. Your body adapts, and then what you're doing doesn't work anymore. So that applies to your rep ranges too. So don't, be an equal opportunity rep ranger. Do everything. Not necessarily all at once, not necessarily random. Obviously, there's rhymes and reasons to it, but just don't get caught up in, okay, well, this rep range does this, so that's all I want to do. Try not to do that. And when you are maybe following someone or doing workouts from someone who tends to do that, then maybe you want to broaden your horizons. If there's a specific workout DVD that you like to do all the time, but that person tends to only work out in one rep range or promote one rep range, or maybe you just like that rep range and that's the only type of workout that you buy from that person, then that should bring a red flag to you that you're getting extreme with what you're thinking. You're not just going for in a moderate, balanced way. And whenever you step outside of moderation, then you have to realize that the flip side of moderating something is that you're going to tend to have negative results in another area. So it's no different than when you're with food. If you tend to go crazy on a certain food, there's a lot of times that you can actually cause a sensitivity to a food that maybe you weren't really sensitive to in the first place. But because you just kept eating it over and over and over and didn't have the variety, you create almost an allergy or allergy-like symptoms or some type of sensitivity to the food. And then what happens is that, once again, we move into an extreme mindset where now the food is bad. Maybe the food wasn't bad. Maybe you were just eating the food too much. So, sometimes you can back off of a food or maybe eliminate it for a short period of time and then slowly add it back in. But that doesn't necessarily mean that food is bad. So another example of the extremism would be entire food group restrictions. Granted, there are legit allergies out there, and I'm not saying that that's not the case. We've dealt with allergies in my family, whether it be myself or my son. Later in life now, my husband is starting to become more lactose intolerant. My son was lactose intolerant when he was younger. He also had some other allergies that were causing him to break out and everything, which he slowly grew out of. And myself, because of a lot of health issues that I've had, I've gone on probably every elimination diet known to mankind. I've had to remove a lot of things from my diet, but I've also added many of them back in. That was key. That was a key thing that my doctors let me know up front, is if this does not solve the problem, then let's not create one. Let's add it back in. And that's something that you need to be aware of. Sometimes a sensitivity may be temporary. Sometimes a sensitivity is legit, or maybe it's tied to another food that you're eating. Maybe if you have that thing in moderation, you won't really have a problem. Those are things that you need to consider before just deciding, I'm just going to go extreme with it and totally remove this thing from my diet. Because what happens then is that you start to lean heavily to another food group, which just perpetuates the problem. So you may solve one problem, but maybe you're like ODing on another food group or macronutrient group, so that, to the exclusion of the other. So you don't want to try to solve a problem by creating a new one. And the best way to avoid doing that is by keeping things moderate. Just like the same example that I gave with the exercise. You can create overuse injuries if you only choose to do one type of exercise and you don't balance it out. So if you're only exercising one part of the body, then the opposite part of the body is going to get weaker. If you're only eating one type of food, then you can either create an intolerance or sensitivity to that food, or you can create an intolerance or sensitivity to the food that you excluded that wasn't really a problem. It's just that because you take it out, by the time you reintroduce it, it's like foreign to your body. So you have a reaction and you assume that, oh, well, see, I'm having a reaction to this, so it was right for me to remove it. Not always necessarily the case. It could just be because you removed it and now it's foreign to your body, so you're having a reaction. That happens a lot. It really happens more often than people think, and they assume that it's a confirmation that they were sensitive to whatever the removed item was. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. So if you're not under the guidance of a physician or a registered dietitian or somebody that's walking you through this elimination process, it's really hard to gauge on your own, and sometimes your body can react in ways that causes you to think that it's something totally different. So EM2WL stance is avoid food avoidance unless otherwise specified by your doctor. May not be a popular stance. I know that there are a ton of EM2WL people. There's fam that have food group exclusions, or they have declared that they have sensitivities, maybe on their own, maybe with a doctor, but more than often on their own. And they feel like they're doing fine. And if you truly feel like it's making you feel better and there's nothing that I can do to convince you otherwise, then you gotta do what you gotta do. I mean, I'm not, like I said in a previous video about our stance on paleo and all those things, we're not your parents. We're not here to like dictate what you eat. We feel like that every food should be given an opportunity, though. And if you truly find that there's some type of physical reaction that you're having, like if you have celiac, obviously you're not going to indulge in gluten foods. But it's just key to know that if you're not diagnosed with something that causes you to remove that thing from your diet, then understand, and this is coming from experience, you can remove something that you're not allergic to from your diet, add that thing back in, and have a reaction to it. It happened to me. Some of the things I chose to work through because I felt that they were worth it and I wanted to have them in my diet forever. And there were other things that, I decided, it's not really that big of a deal. So that's why I'm not going to completely knock it out. I understand that there's things that you will just stop eating. I'm not saying go out and eat anything and junk and everything, but just keep that under consideration. Food avoidance is a slippery slope, and you can get to the point where you're not eating anything. I got to that point, and you're miserable still. So it's just, don't necessarily go down that slope if it's not something that you're willing to stick with forever.